Hello, thank you for tuning in to part 5, I think it is, for study of the Black Church, or Black Church history, a brief introduction. And again, the purpose for this is during the month of Black History to give you a brief introduction to Black Church history. So I'm going to pick up a little bit on where we left off, do a brief little a recap of where we were. All right, so I ended the last session talking about why some slave owners did not want their slaves being converted to Christianity. So before I dive into that, I want to read a scripture. I normally like to start with a brief passage of scripture. So I want to read Acts chapter number 2, verse 46 and 47. Verses 46 and 47 says this. Day by day, continuing with one mind in the temple and breaking bread from house to house, they were taking their meals together with gladness and sincerity of heart, praising God and having favor with all people. And the Lord was adding to their number day by day those who were being saved. So we ended in the last session talking about how missionaries wanted to get on plantations and really share the gospel message with slaves. But slave owners weren't having it because they were concerned that their slaves would become uppity, or saucy was the term that they used at that time. Because they believed that if you were baptized, and you would be set free. And so slave owners didn't want slaves being set free because they would lose them as a workforce. So missionaries had to come up with a scheme, and the scheme was sort of a marketing scheme, was to say that your slaves would be better slaves if they became Christians. They would work better and be more profitable for you. Well, that didn't necessarily work the way they planned it to. So you've got two groups here. You've got the good slaves and the bad slaves. And so let's start with the bad slaves. I'm going to read a couple of quotes to you that was describing how some slaves responded after accepting Christianity. So I'm going to read just a couple of quotes to describe how some slaves responded after accepting Christianity. One person, George Ross, described it this way. He was a pastor, minister at Emmanuel Church in Delaware. He described it as some slaves began to have a general indifference. Even church-going plantation owners had an issue with their slaves, and it says that they became haughty, the behavior of the Negroes who had been admitted into the Christian fellowship. Reverend Philip Reading in Pennsylvania said this, that the slaves themselves, he wished them slaves would stop becoming rebellious after baptism. And as a matter of fact, their rebelliousness caused many plantation owners to become prejudiced to their slaves being converted. One other person, Elias Niu, said this. In 1723, he said that some slaves have, under the pretense of going to catechism, to church training, they said, I'm going to church training, and they took that as an opportunity to be absent from their master's service for many days. All right? I'm going to my new members class, and so I can't go in the field today. And this is what slaves were doing. So much so that they then had to create a statement in the church for new slaves, or slaves being converted. And this was the statement that slaves had to accept before they were allowed to be baptized. I'm going to read the statement to you. Candidates for baptism were required to attest to the following. You declare in the presence of God and before this congregation that you do not ask for the holy baptism out of any design to free yourself from the duty and obedience that you owe to your master while you live, but merely for the good of your soul and to partake of the graces and blessings promised to the members of the church of Jesus Christ. One other guy, James Blair. James Blair was a bishop from London. He was their representative in Virginia, and he described how blacks became, after being baptized and seeing that baptism and their conversion did not free them from physical oppression. He says this, and when they saw that baptism did not change their status, they grew angry and saucy and met in the nighttime in great numbers and talked of rising up. And so the threat of rebellion after slaves became Christian, the threat of rebellion after slaves became Christian resulted in slave patrols to make sure they did not see particularly recent converts of slavery gathering together in order to create some rebellion. So slave patrols then, because at that time, modern policing forces did not exist at that time, you would have had the sheriff to really keep white folk from killing each other with the gun duels or whatever. It was an unashamed society, and so that's when you had the duels. And so you'd have had a sheriff to really keep white folk from killing each other. But slave patrols were a different kind of policing force to make sure that the new converts of Christianity did not take this new religion and find that it didn't free them of their oppression and began to gather together for rebellion. And so slaves were not allowed to gather together at nighttime as Christians. So that's the bad slaves. Watch the flip side. On the other hand, some slaves did just what was expected of them. Some slaves became better slaves and more profitable to their slave owner. So much so that one person described it like this. He says of the slave, particularly those that were allowed to preach to other slaves, some of them were allowed to go teach other slaves because they were just so good and the master then was okay with them. This is what one person says. By them, that slave, that was a good slave, was able to go talk to other folk. By them, I am informed when there is disorder among their fellow slaves, that it may be remitted. In other words, by this slave, I'm able to find out whenever there's going to be a rebellion, I can quench it quick, fast, and in a hurry. So immediately, even in the beginning, we began to see that this same Bible is read differently by slaves. There are some who read it and became quiet and they just did exactly what the master wanted. There was others who read it and became rebellious. And the same sort of thing exists today in preaching circles. We call it, there's the priestly tribe and the prophetic tribe. The priestly tribe, let's go along to get along. Prophetic tribe, nah, let's turn everything upside down until we find our freedom. All right? So that's a little bit of that. But then there was something that took place in America. Something that was earth-shattering. Something that transformed Christianity, not just amongst the slaves, but transformed Christianity in America. And that was the Great Awakening. The Great Awakening. One person, Jonathan Edwards, particularly valued amongst my white evangelical brothers and sisters. They value Jonathan Edwards, a great preacher, and he described a revival just before the Great Awakening took place. It's literally, some will call it a shadow or just the beginnings of an avalanche, if you will. And he described the revival that was taking place in Massachusetts. It was between 1734 and 1736, 2-year revival, long time for a revival. So Jonathan Edwards said this: there were several Negroes who, from what I have seen in them and what's discernible in them, appear to have been truly born again. Jonathan Edwards, who was a slave owner, describes something was even happening amongst the slaves at this time. Now, by 1740, the Great Awakening was in full effect in America. Y'all, there was revival everywhere. And it wasn't just amongst blacks. It was amongst blacks. It was amongst whites. Everybody was coming to Jesus. Churches were growing all over the place. And so at this time, one Presbyterian, Samuel Davis actually became the president of Princeton. At the time, it was New Jersey College, College of New Jersey, Princeton University. He became the president, but he was a preacher as well. And he talked about, at one point in time in his church, he said 40 blacks around the table. By that he meant there was 40 black folk who came to church for communion. He even described it in his ministry. He's even ministered up to 1,000 of them in the church. Something is taking place. Now, how do we got 1,000 black people that one Presbyterian had ministered to? But it gets better. That's amongst Presbyterians. Their numbers were growing. Oh, but amongst Baptists and Methodists, it was growing like wildfire. In 1786, this was the first year that the Methodist denomination just decided to separate the numbers and count blacks and whites separately and not just give one general account. And so in 1786, watch this major jump. 1786, they recorded 1,890 black people who were Methodists. 18,791 white Methodists. By 1790, 4 years later, it had jumped to 11,862 black people. That's a major jump. And that was primarily, particularly for Methodists, that was primarily in Maryland, North Carolina, and South Carolina. And even to this day, when you go to Maryland, North Carolina, South Carolina, you will notice a lot of black Methodists in these areas still, because there was a great growth during the Great Awakening amongst these denominations. Now, Baptists, on the other hand, did not keep good records. Baptists got a little bit better now, but they didn't keep good records the way the Methodists did. However, many people estimate that by 1973, there was between 18,000 and 19,000 black Baptists. So, with this great kind of revival, at this point in time, slave owners don't care because they getting converted too. They really coming to Jesus, and they don't mind slaves knowing Jesus. Not only that, they don't even mind the slaves preaching now. So one of the reasons that there was a major growth, particularly amongst Methodists and Baptists, one of the reasons there was a large growth is because Methodists and Baptists did not require well-educated preachers. They did not require well-educated clergy. And because of that, many people then had the opportunity to preach, or for the slaves or the blacks, it would have been to exhort, right? Watch what happens. In 1792, in Roanoke, Virginia, the Roanoke Association, they purchased a slave by the name of Simon. They purchased this brother and set him free to be full-time in ministry. 1792, a white Christian association in Roanoke, Virginia, bought a slave preacher and set him free to go preach the gospel. Then also down in Virginia, in Gloucester County, Virginia, William Lehman pastored a white Baptist church, 1790s. In 1804, Joseph Willis, he moved from Mississippi, where he had church there, and this brother went to Louisiana, and he started the first Baptist church in Louisiana. I want you to understand what I'm saying. I didn't mean First Baptist compared to Second Baptist. No. He was the first, as in the only Baptist church in the state of Louisiana. The first one. Louisiana was highly Catholic. And so Baptist got its footing in Louisiana because of a black preacher. Go a little further. He then started other churches, other Baptist churches in Louisiana. And so then by, I think it's like 1709, he became the moderator, the first moderator of the Baptist Association in Louisiana, a black man. One last example. In 1801, a brother by the name, black man by the name of John Chavis. John Chavis was given the opportunity by the Presbyterian General Assembly to work as a missionary in Virginia and North Carolina. He was able to be a missionary to black people. But by 1808, John Chavis, a black man, started a school in Raleigh, North Carolina. He started a school to teach white children during the day and black children at night. This is 1808. John Chavis is doing this. All of this expansion, all of these opportunities for blacks to be able to speak for themselves, to have freedoms that others did not have, came because of the church. And there were some white folk who understood that these black people have something to say, so much so that by 1808, a black man started a school, and during the day, he was teaching white children. This is the power that took place because God brought a great awakening in America. All right, that's part 5. Black church history. We're going to spend a little bit more. God bless. Listen, if this has been helpful for you, do me a favor. Go ahead, click share, copy the link or what have you, and share it with someone else. Maybe this has been helpful as well. If you got some questions, go ahead, leave a comment. If you got some debates, if you disagree with something I've said, you've got some other factual information, go ahead and share that as well. God bless. Thank you. Peace.